interesting, and it plants a seed with you. So very quickly, we're going to say that we all know that people are living much longer than they used to live, right? And furthermore, on average, and furthermore, not everybody, but on average. And furthermore, we know that this change has happened very quickly in time. So one of the points that I like to sort of show people on this graph is, who knows when Social Security was passed as a law in this country? 1935, Muriel wins. 65 is Medicare. So in 1935, the life expectancy of people in the US was in the 60, 63-year-old range. For people who turned 65 and were eligible for Social Security, the average life expectancy of those who turned 65 was about 7 years. It is therefore not that surprising that we're in something of an actuarial surprise when we have people who are living 20 and 30 years longer than that routinely and on average. Now, oh dear, I'm going to skip this because it's incredibly interesting, but I could talk about it until I need to stop talking. What am I doing here? What am I doing wrong? You know, I may have to take you guys up on the offer to have somebody else do the slides, because I don't want, do you want to do them? Because I don't want to do this. There we go. So before you start saying, wow, Tom said she was positive about aging and she's doing the same old doomsday stuff, let me say to you that the aging of the population in the US and globally is the triumph of public health and economic development. This is what success looks like. We're what success looks like. And the aging of the population around the world is what success looks like, because its component parts are people living longer because why? They're not dying, right, of diseases and disabilities and poverty at the rate that they were before. And what's the other component part? Women are having fewer children, which means that the average age of the population also increases. And why is it that women are having fewer children? And right, exactly, because women's opportunities around the world are increasing. Their educational opportunities are increasing, their employment opportunities are increasing, and their belief that their children will survive is increasing. And that means that people have less children. These are the goals of economic development and public health. So it's kind of, skip this one, it's kind of a drag that when we have achieved success in this way, the policymakers and the discourse around us is, we have an aging tsunami, right? And now, is a tsunami sound like a positive thing? Not so much, right? And the dialogue around an aging tsunami is the dialogue around the way governments are going to go broke, and the dependency ratio is all wrong, and everybody is like frail and disabled, and that's the tsunami conversation. And then there's the aging opportunity conversation, and these are the people that are talking about generativity and creativity and volunteering and working and so on. And In point of fact, neither of those simplistic versions of reality is adequate or sufficient, and you're all far too intelligent for me to try to sell you either bill of goods. So let's talk seriously for a minute. If we're to realize the potential for the opportunity side of that aging equation, it has to be possible for people of all ages to do some very basic stuff. That very basic stuff, as it turns out, to age successfully includes exercise. I resisted believing this for a long time, but the evidence is absolutely clear that it's not just about your physical body, it's also about your brain and your mental health and so on. All of these are dependent on moving your body around. It's very much more important, by the way, than doing crossword puzzles, whatever you may have heard. And engagement. And engagement is this really complicated, deep concept that involves being connected to the communities of importance to us, being connected to the work and the passions important to us, and being connected to the people who are important to us. So now we start to come to the big questions, okay? So can we take this premise? Are we all right with this premise? A little bit, right? We'll take it. We'll take it under advisement. You've skipped. Yeah. So in order, where's our big question two? All right, we'll just go with it. So in order to systematically investigate the conditions for aging in cities and communities, the World Health Organization worked long and hard to develop this sort of construct of what it takes to age successfully wherever you are. And they defined 8 domains that Carolyn knows I could talk about all evening, but I won't. That instead we're going to talk about in some specific detail going forward. And they include that outdoor spaces and buildings work for people of all ages, that housing is available and accessible for people of all ages, that there is communication and information about the assets and resources here. This is where oats started, but it's gone way beyond that simple idea. That everyone is afforded the opportunity for inclusion and respect, no matter who they are and no matter what their age or other abilities, that there's opportunities for social participation, civic engagement, and also community support and health services. These things are built on the core pillars defined by the World Health Organization and the UN. I've got all the experts in the room. It makes me really nervous. Those 3 pillars are on a previous slide, and they include health, participation, and security, which means both economic security and safety, right? So that's what is required to have successful aging. Now, here you start to come to the difficult questions. Whose responsibility is this? Is this an individual responsibility, or is this a collective and government responsibility? Those people who are focusing on the individual responsibility part of this are the people that are saying you need to take a class to learn how to not fall. You need to take a class in financial planning, security management. I need to educate you now about the different ways that you can be victimized by fraud and abuse. You need, right, all of these kind of things, which are important. But this is the framework that is saying successful aging is the responsibility of the person who's doing it, right? And so we need to teach them how to do it right, okay? That's the individual responsibility frame. We're going to teach people how to do this right. It's a collective responsibility, a government responsibility, and the responsibility of every single player in the private sector is the perspective of these movements like Age-Friendly New York. You could do another slide, I hope. Like Age-Friendly New York, livable communities, and other such kind of larger scale systems change approaches that are working on what make the conditions that make it possible for people to do that engagement piece, that exercise piece, that security piece, the participation piece, right? What are the conditions that you need? So one of them, obviously, is you have to be able to get around, right? Ain't no participation if there's no flow. So an example of ways to make transportation easier that happened here in New York City at the behest of the age-friendly folks and the city folks, and actually a lot of private companies that wanted to advertise in these bus shelters, is that, I don't know if you guys are New Yorkers, but do you remember the old tin boxes that used to be bus shelters? Kind of like a little tin cave that you got in to wait for the bus? Well, those weren't so perfect for people who are old or for anybody else, because you had to stand in them. You were a sitting duck in them because nobody could see you in there, so they were highly vulnerable, and also they stank for reasons that we won't go into on the internet. These were replaced with bus shelters that you can see through, that have benches built in, prefabricated as part of the bus shelter, and that actually make money for the city because of those ads on them. Next. Furthermore, okay, outdoor spaces. New York City, we're a city of walking. It's actually the most common mode of transportation in the city, which is one of the reasons that, believe it or not, we're less obese than other cities in the country because people walk more. Everybody of every age, the most common way that they get to and from in their trip is to walk. However, for some people of every age, but disproportionately people of older age, part of being able to walk is being able to rest. And New York took all the benches out a few decades ago, anxious as they were that people could sleep on those benches and live on those benches, and so all the benches went. An initiative to help to make this an environment that promotes engagement is to put the benches back in the city, and furthermore, to put them back where people say they want and need the benches. So there's this community participatory planning piece. You can go to the DOT website still today and ask for a bench. Cool, right? Next. focus on sidewalks is a further dimension of open spaces and transportation, one that is very much a work in progress, as I know everybody in the room knows, but is a next step that we'll come to later. Next. And now, Carolyn's seen this slide a million times. There's probably several people in the room that have seen it. The Age-Friendly New York City people do their work. I worked with them for many years, so we did our work and they continue to do their work, starting by talking to the people who are the most directly involved, which is older people, ourselves, who are experts on our own lives. They started in East Harlem because it's the neighborhood where they are. One of the things that people told them surprisingly often was, God, it's been so long since I've been to the pool. I remember the Tom Jeff pool when I was a kid, and it's still there now. I loved going there when I was a kid, and it's been 30 years, it's been 40 years, it's been 50 years, it's been 60 years since I was in that pool. It's the math right, yeah, it's a WPA pool. So we said, well, how come you can't go in the pool? It's free. And they said, well, because you'd have to be crazy to go in the pool. It's completely, you'd get jumped on, bounced on, run around, and furthermore, I'm embarrassed in my bathing suit. This is when we knew people were telling us the truth. So through a long series of events, we got senior swim to happen, first at one pool, and then it was so successful that it expanded to 15 pools after that, and my understanding is it expands further to each pool that has the sort of physical capacity to have people in it. So this is part of making a world for old and for young that works. Now, this is actually the easy part. The part about the physical environment, the built environment, transportation is actually easier than the part about social engagement, because the part about social engagement involves changing people's attitudes, changing how people act, and changing how people think. And even though infrastructure is tough, attitudes are tougher. And so we need to talk and think about what are the frameworks that are opportunities for culture change. And the framework that I keep coming back to, and actually that the Columbia Aging Center keeps coming back to as a center, is the framework of work. Work, you say? The framework of work? Are you given the wrong talk? Are you taught? No, I'm given the right talk. So the framework of work that we have in this country is built on that old understanding of longevity. We built our understanding of what part of your life you should spend being educated, what part of your life you should spend working, and what part of your life you should spend on permanent vacation, back when life was 30 years less than it is now. And as it turns out, many people don't want to be on vacation for 30 years. Many people get their sense of purpose, their sense of identity, their sense of value, worth, and friends through their work and professional identities. There are other people who have to work. Some of them are the same people who get all those senses of self from work. Now, it's not okay for people who have worked all their lives and are eligible to retire to have to continue to work economically. But it is also not okay that people who want to be able to work aren't able to engage with work or find work. We need to hold both of those realities at the same time, which is sometimes hard, but we do. And what's true is that our workforce here in New York City is in fact changing. We have close to 1 million workers who are over 55. And so I work hard on a program called Age Smart Employer, whose objective is to help workplaces understand policies and practices that they can implement in their workplace themselves that make it possible for people of all ages to work there. And how do we do that is not by saying, is not by saying, you employers need to consider yourself a charitable organization and take on a lot of people to come and work with you. No. The way we do this is to help employers to understand the benefits of older workers. And those benefits are significant and considerable. And we have research that we're doing, have done, and are continuing to do that shows that very clearly. A benefit of older workers is expertise. It takes thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of doing a task to achieve mastery in that task. It's kind of a waste to imagine that along about the time you really get good at something, you're expected to stop doing it. This is a photo, one of many, many, many that we took. This is Steinway pianos. And in Steinway pianos, you start working there in the lumber yard in your late teens, early 20s, even if your last name is Steinway. You start working in the lumber yard. And you work your way up through the different jobs. Everybody can't do every job, but the people who tune Steinway pianos before they leave the shop are over 75, because that is the highest tech job in the factory. And people have to do it because there isn't a machine that has tight enough specs to be able to do that job. Expertise is a benefit of older workers. Reliability is a benefit of older workers. This is McNulty Coffee Place. It's down on Bleecker. There are many, many, many small businesses around the city. About 99% of the businesses in New York are small businesses, and many of the owners of those are over 55. And reliability and building a business is part of the way of operating of those business owners. This is Rosen Watch. Ever heard of them? They build the water towers. They build the water towers that are what make New York, New York. And their workforce, it runs a very wide age gamut because it is older workers that have the skills and the expertise to go up onto the roofs and install the water towers. How we think about these things are based on what our expectations are. One more that I just can't resist because it's so beautiful. It's not really making a new point, but isn't it the best picture? Another value of older workers in the workplace is customer base. Think about it. It's the older workers that know everybody, knows what they want, knows what they like. And we just did a whole lot of research and a bunch of guides, industry-specific guides for manufacturing and skilled trades where they're seeing shortages. Look, testing you. Where they're seeing shortages, restaurants that are being murdered by high turnover, and older workers are, she's shaking her head in the back, she's like, this is, what? You'll have your chance. Right. Yep. Family-owned businesses and nonprofits have a similar thing going on. There was a whole bunch of them founded, let me think, about 40 years ago. And so guess what? We have between 60 and 70% of the nonprofit leaders in this city are around 3/4 of the nonprofit leaders in the city are over 55 and have no succession plan in place. Numbers are very analogous for family-run businesses, no succession plan in place. So it's not that shocking that we've identified 10 advantages to hiring older workers and are working to persuade employers to think about older workers differently, because we can do all the workforce training, all the resume building, all the networking facilitation, and all the and skills stuff that we want. If the employers at the other end are unwilling to think of older people as valuable, it's all for naught. And this is the kind of work that is culture change work. And Age Smart Employer is an awards program. Somebody will hand out postcards, and you can nominate businesses that should win the award. You can't nominate businesses that should get the thumbs down award. We're not in that business. Okay, next, moving on. Now, go back, I'm sorry. We'll look at the beautiful, beautiful picture of the roof while I say, now, obviously, work is not the only means of engagement. I like to lean hard on it because it's surprising. Is it halfway? We're golden. We're golden. I can do this. Other forms of meaningful engagement that we need to think about how we make more available have to do with how can people of every age continue to be themselves as they age, which means continuing to pursue their passions, their creativity, their artistry. If you were an opera singer, that you can keep being an opera singer. If you were an amazing organizer, that you continue to be an organizer. If your passion is puppet dancing, you can continue to be a puppet dancer. If your passion is kids and working with kids and having kids, that there's an opportunity for you to continue to engage with kids, even though your own may be grown or you never had any of your own, which is why you love them so much. So we don't think about our entire framework of volunteering, of civic engagement, of participation with our cultural institutions and organizations, of participation in sports and sporting events, in participation in the life of the city through the lens of, is this gonna work for everybody? It's not that useful to have a bunch of free tickets available that you only know if they're available on the day of the show, right? If you happen to be in one particular place at one particular time, or else on the internet in some magic secret spot that nobody wants anybody to know. That's not making the wonders of the city available. We have to do better than that. And we're New York, and we can. I'm going to save the political engagement because I'm going to come back to it and hit it hard. So next. So I hope that some of you anyway think, okay, this is a vision of aging that I could get behind. Maybe it's okay with me. Have I convinced anybody? Is there anybody's, people are, that wasn't a very ringing endorsement. It kind of bummed out. Yeah, you're there? You were there already. Okay, cool. What? Exactly, and no. So now I'm coming to that part. Are doing. Now I'm coming to that part. Okay? Coming there. I'm at 30 minutes, right? I can't be all the way around the horn in 30 minutes. So the next question is, how do we make this happen? You know, which is, they say up where I work now, what's our theory of change? How do we make this happen? And to talk about this, I want to contrast two programs that I love. And so next, and we're talking about our theory of change here, okay? So the first program is called Safe Streets for Seniors. It's a wonderful program. It's run by the Department of Transportation. It's part of Age-Friendly New York, and it works like this. If there has been a pedestrian fatality of an older person at an intersection, we will go and we will look at that intersection and we will figure out what is wrong with it from a traffic engineering perspective, and we will fix it. We will make an improvement in that intersection. And it'll be specific. You know, in some places the curb needs to come out. In other places the crosswalk needs to be marked more clearly. In other places we need a turning lane. We will fix the intersection where there was a fatality, okay? And this program has been successful in reducing fatalities by around 20% at those intersections. There's about 100 of them, okay? So that is Safe Streets for Seniors. That's option A, okay? Next. Option B is Vision Zero. I did this especially for Tom. Vision Zero is an alternate approach to the same set of issues. So what Vision Zero is an across-the-board strategy to reduce pedestrian fatalities for everybody, everywhere in the city. And where did it come from? Vision Zero grew out of collective action that grew from the grief and anger and pain of a specific set of parents who lost their child on the street in front of their house to a speeding driver. His name was Sammy Eckstein, and he's a friend of my son's. And his parents used their grief as a catalyst for action and stimulated. Now, this is in Park Slope, and the councilman is a buddy of the mayor's, and the mayor lived down the street. And so you've got a situation where you've got outraged people with access and influence who came together in a very broad community, got a lot of people mobilized on their side, and Vision Zero, which is a set of policy changes that includes lowering the overall city speed limit to 25 miles an hour, was passed. So, next slide. What's our theory of change? What's the contrast? The contrast here is the first one is cost effective, it's fast, it's government controlled, and it's efficient. It's an administrative fix to a problem, right? It's a little bit, got a little shut the barn door after the horse got out because there's already been a traffic fatality at that intersection, but it lowers the chance of another one, okay? So this is a good program. It's a targeted government administrative program. Vision Zero, what's that? It's a broad-based preventive program that's very unpopular with powerful interests that was promoted by community mobilization. What's our theory of change, right? Which of those do we think we need now vis-a-vis aging? What's coming up? I would like to make the argument that the pattern of underinvestment in the things that older people need, the lack of vision to recognize older adults as assets, and the consequential, unacceptable, forced choices that we are all facing are the result of the following. It's easy to say, ageism. The problem is ageism. Ageism is the name of the outcome. But what causes that outcome, I believe, is that we have a lack of older adults defining the vision, of older adults designing the solution, and of older adults demanding and taking action. Now, this doesn't mean I think you should fire me. The experts, the academics, the advocates, the service providers. But as I learned from Ted Dostal, Miss Georgia Andrews, and Josephine Biasiota, who were the leaders at the Senior Citizen Coalition in Cleveland, Ohio in 1979, they said, it's fine. You just need to understand you work for us, right? We want you here. We want you doing what you're doing, but just understand you work for us. And it's my belief that for all the big citywide initiatives, all the wonderful visionary organizations, what we don't have is a mass movement. Now, question 4. Can't even talk about Luis. The question 4 is, how do we reclaim the agenda? And now, I'm really going to go way out there. And some of you are going to be like, I want to talk with you about HIV/AIDS. I want to talk with you, this is the first 20 years of my work life. I worked in HIV/AIDS. And the advocacy around HIV/AIDS has some things to teach us all. First of all, the ground shifted in the policy environment around AIDS when people living with AIDS said, we are the experts on our own lives, and you will call us people living with AIDS because we told you to, not people with AIDS or AIDS or any of the rest of it. And furthermore, the policy making that's going on now that is predominantly about protecting other people from us, no. We have a new set of policy making that is going to go on, which is about how do we change the existing systems to better meet our needs. And when there is no existing system, how do we put in a new one? And as you know, I think, that movement was enormously effective, not only for people living with AIDS, but it changed the way policy making and many policies for everybody. It changed clinical trials. That's the process by which drugs get approved, from being principally placebo-controlled trials to being standard of care, comparing to the standard of care. That is a direct speed up and improvement in drug approvals that affects everybody. I can sort of go on and on and on. There was, a bunch of community infrastructure was funded on that basis and so on. But how'd that there work? That worked because there was an interplay back and forth between a broad activist base, a policy, academic, and advocacy layer, and allies in government, in and around government. And the flow of information and strategies, we played the inside-outside game. We played the top-down, bottom-up game very, very well. In aging, we are not yet playing those games, right? So, what step can I take today? Come out as old. Come out as your age. I'm 60. No takers. No one else is ready to come out with their age? Right? And you have to bring your whole self in to all your work. This is not about stop doing that other work you're doing. It's about bringing your age into that work. The best civil rights activists in the city, the best tenants' rights activists in the city, the best gay rights activists in the city, the best women's rights activists in the city, the best, you can do it yourself. I don't have to recite. Disability rights, environment, are all aging. But do they bring the perspective of that aging into that activism? No, it's like we're ashamed. It's like we think it's a secret that we're aging. I was at, a sort of glorious event that was about aging somebody or others. I can't explain who or I'll give it away. And on and on and on. I mean, this week this was. And then everybody got done, and from the stage, they all said, but don't count me as a senior citizen. Of course, I'm not there. And I was sort of like, well, really, what are we saying? So what I'm saying is we have to be able to hold our multiple identities concurrently. And we have to bring our whole selves in, because only when we do that are we going to be the witnesses and the experts that we need to make the city work for us. If we leave it to technical fixes, then after there's a traffic fatality, we will have the intersection fixed. But I think most of us in the room, while we want that, would also like to prevent the fatality in the first place. And to prevent the fatality in the first place, you have to make a different set of policies in the first place. So that's what I think. So I think that only then, when we do that, will we realize a city where we don't have these horrible forced housing choices, none of which are acceptable. Yes, ma'am. It is 6:30, and I am so wrapping up. I am so on my last point. Thank you. We will have educational opportunities that are meaningful across the lifespan. We will have volunteer paths that aren't demeaning, but are in fact enriching. We will have a health system that focuses on vertical and horizontal integration so that it works for real people who have to use it instead of working for providers. And we'll have an old age that we want to have.